Danielle Smith just brought forward some of the most difficult policies against vulnerable youth that the country has ever seen. And I heard Mr. Poilievre went off against the LGBT community again this morning. So let far-right politicians pick fights with trans kids. Shame on them. And of course, as a government, we're going to be there to protect our most vulnerable.
Well, folks, you heard it from the man himself. I guess Trudeau doesn't think that women and girls are some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And that's what today's story is going to be about. Now, it's going to be a bit of a touchy subject, especially being on YouTube. So I might have to say a few words a little bit differently. But this is all because Pierre just had a press conference the other day where he was asked a question about T individuals, T women, and this was his response to that.
My question, sir, is should you form the next federal government, will you make female safe spaces safe again by introducing legislation that bans so-called transgender women from participating in female sports and getting access into female shelters and female prisons?
Female spaces should be exclusively for females, not for biological males. You ask if I introduce legislation on that. A lot of the spaces you described are provincially and municipally controlled. So it is unclear what federal legislation what reach federal legislation would have to change them. But obviously, female sports, female change rooms, female bathrooms should be for females, not for biological males.
Now, apparently in 2024, this is a very controversial statement when this is something we've known from the start of all of this, especially when we started separating sports from males and females so that they didn't compete because there was advantages and disadvantages and et cetera, et cetera. However, if you're a concerned parent like I am and many others in this country, let alone around the world, as a Canadian, you were just recently notified that you actually don't have any rights as a parent, only responsibilities. And this news has actually started to pick up internationally.
I mean, Canada has some pretty insane cases that are going on right now about gender transition from really young kids. And there's all this pushback with parents, and there's all this because the parents are not being told that their children want to transition. So there's this guy that was talking about these issues of parents' rights in Canada, and he specifically said that parents don't have rights in Canada, that they have, I feel like he said they have obligations. Is that the term he used?
Well, I'd like to say, first of all, there's no such thing as parental rights in Canada. There are parental responsibilities. And in Canadian family law, the primary responsibility of parents is to support and affirm their kids. Children have rights in Canada, and these kind of policies restrict the rights that children have in Canada.
Wild, I know. Now, if you were listening to the question at the beginning there, David Menzies was that one asking that question from Rebel News. Now, Rebel News has been doing a lot of stories lately uncovering this, and they just had the T woman who is the 50-year-old who identifies as a 13-year-old and swims with 13-year-old girls, and also goes into the change room, which, again, you never heard anything about. I've covered that on another story. But shortly after that story, he uncovered another story at Centennial and Seneca where they have males playing on the varsity girls volleyball team while the real girls are just sitting on the sidelines.
We were tipped off that this female volleyball game that we witnessed earlier featured not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 men pretending to be females. 3 were on Seneca, 2 were on Centennial. Gee, can you imagine which side won? Not only that, the male players were always on the court. So you had biological female substitutes just sitting on the bench for the entire game.
But again, as Trudeau stated, these aren't the people that he thinks should be protected. These girls, no, they should stay on the bench because these T women, who are technically women, according to him, I guess, deserve it far more than the actual biological women. This, again, just bananas. I don't understand how this guy is still in power. But While Trudeau was at this press conference, some of the reporters asked him again about this whole topic. And he just started spiraling into things that had nothing to do with that topic, like housing, affordability, dental, childcare. And to the point where it got back to the reporter, and the reporter was like, okay, I'm going to ask my question again. What is it that you're doing for, T individuals? And take a listen to what he says here.
I'll ask it again, sir. What can or what is your government doing to protect the rights of trans kids now and in the future?
I was sitting down with a number of doctors from the Canadian Medical Association. I think one of the things we should all do in difficult issues is rely on experts, rely on science, on researchers, on people who actually work with vulnerable kids.
Now, if you missed that part, he says, trust the science or follow the science. And this got me thinking, where have I heard him saying this before?
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, we have had Canadians' backs by following the science. I'm pleased to hear the Conservatives finally talking about following science.
On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we intend to follow the science.
Around the world are opening up, even countries with lower vaccination rates than Canada. Provinces are beginning to lift restrictions and getting life back to normal. Why? Because they're following the science. So why is the Prime Minister so offside, not only with the science, but it would seem like with a growing number of his own MPs?
Ah, yes, the good old vaccine mandates, where Trudeau had to implement the Emergency Act, even though he would state 9 out of 10 Canadians were already vaccinated. And even when the health departments would state we should start opening up again, as Candice Bergen said, even the countries with lower vaccination rates than we did, he still was always saying, let's follow the science, we're following the science. This guy wouldn't know science if it kicked him in the ass. But again, there's no scientific consensus on gender-affirming care or anything like this, yet a lot of these places have just been captured by this ideology and pushed forward because of, who knows, probably profit. And when we listen to Dr. Phil, who was actually on that episode of Joe Rogan when he said that earlier statement, he talks about how they always say the self-deletion rate is going to increase if we don't do this gender-affirming care, yet there's no studies to back that up.
I mean, let's be commonsensical. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at science. Let's not look at what you want to be the truth. Let's look at what is the facts. Let's look at what is science. And we've got these people that, it's interesting, they choose words like gender-affirming care. That's interesting that they call it that, but really what they're talking about is hormonal therapy or sex reassignment surgery on children. And in fairness, the American Medical Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Endocrine Society, or whatever the exact name of that is, all of the major medical associations have signed off on this, Joe. They've signed off on it. And I have never seen those organizations sign off on anything with less information as to whether or not it does long-term harm of anything in my life. And when I ask about that, when I bring that up, then they immediately label you as transphobic. And I thought that the deal was first do no harm. And all of the European countries, Sweden, Norway, they've all stopped doing it because they say, we cannot say in good conscience that this does no harm, because it does harm. If you look at the long-term consequences, if someone changes their mind at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, they can't decide which pajamas they want to wear at night. And their reason for doing it is it stops this drive for suicide, that there's a suicide epidemic. It doesn't fix that. The European countries, they've done study after study from these suppressive hormones compared to doing psychotherapy. and there's not much difference. If you do psychotherapy, you can ease the depression, you can ease the suicidal tendencies with psychotherapy without doing the irreversible things. They say, well, you can reverse those things. No, that's not true. If you arrest the development, that can have ramifications long term, or at least they can't say it doesn't have ramifications long term.
There's also serious side effects from the hormone blockers.
Well, of course, and if you're doing testosterone blockers, for example, that does have long-term consequences. And my point is, they can't say it doesn't. They don't have a body of literature that says it doesn't.
But hey, I guess Dr. Phil just needs to have a sit down with Justin Trudeau because he follows the science. But anyways, that's it for today's video. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.